told me running for Attorney General. Believe it or not, I have 5 children. My oldest son is serving in the Air Force.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm a new face in New Mexico politics. My background is law enforcement. I followed my father's footsteps, served as an FBI special agent, and I've prosecuted hundreds of criminals as an assistant district attorney and an assistant United States attorney. But I'll tell you, the greatest challenge of my life was serving as a medevac helicopter pilot in Afghanistan, flying out onto the battlefield and rescuing injured soldiers. The hardest part of that job was not when I was flying missions, but when I had to sit in the command center and watch my team go out on a UAV screen. When I came home, if that's my probation officer, tell him I'm okay. When I came home and saw the headlines of public corruption just like you, I knew I just couldn't sit there and watch it on a UAV screen, and that's why I'm running for Attorney General. Corruption unchecked is not what I fought for, and not in New Mexico I'm passing on to my children. We have serious challenges facing us in New Mexico, along with great opportunity. Challenges of corrupt officials, challenges of sexual predators, challenges of meth traffickers, and challenges of drunk drivers. We need an Attorney General who has the skill, the training, and the heart to confront these issues head on. When it comes to fighting corruption, I believe in the Rudy Giuliani approach, that every infraction of law, whether it be misuse of government credit card or stealing state equipment, is taken care of vigorously and quickly. Thank you.
Talk fast here. I also want to say that I appreciate the opportunity, and plus this microphone is thinking, that I appreciate the opportunity that the League of Women Voters presents, and the turnout that we have here tonight. It's great. A lot of times there are more candidates than there are people in the crowd when we do these. I'm Gary King. I'm the Democratic nominee for Attorney General, and I feel like what I bring to the Attorney General race is a depth of experience and a breadth of experience that is not had by any other candidate. As a matter of fact, The Nation magazine recently ran an article that said that they thought that I was probably the best qualified candidate in the country that's running for Attorney General. Basically because of my science background. I was a student here at New Mexico State University. I have my degree in chemistry from New Mexico State University. Also, I have a PhD in chemistry from the University of Colorado. So this is, honestly, I think your one and only opportunity to have a PhD chemist as your Attorney General. After I graduated from law school at the University of New Mexico, I returned to Moriarty, to my little hometown, and started my own law firm and had my own law firm for a number of years. I did a general practice. I did virtually everything that you can imagine. I spent 12 years in the New Mexico legislature, primarily fighting for rights for victims of domestic violence, getting drunk drivers off the street, getting drug labs out of our communities. That's what I want to continue to do as Attorney General. I also served 2 years at the Assistant Secretary level at the United States Department of Energy, running a big major federal program. And so I understand federal government, I understand state government, I understand Las Cruces because I lived here and I worked here. I think that I will be the best candidate for you for Attorney General. Thank you.
What experience, if any, do you have in law enforcement and or the courthouse that will help you in the Attorney General's office? I think you both talked about that, but go ahead.
Jim and I are going to alternate too. We actually have done so many debates that we kind of have it all worked out. We've been taking turns and stuff. We think between the two of us we've done more debates than all the other candidates put together. I think the experience that I bring to that is that when I started my law practice, I served as city attorney. I prosecuted DWI cases, which is, I think, what got me interested in the fight against DWI. I served on the Judiciary Committee in the legislature. I served as a clerk for the New Mexico Supreme Court, for the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So I wrote opinions on virtually all kinds of cases. And just with regard to law enforcement, my experience is primarily while I was on the Judiciary Committee working and writing legislation like the Family Violence Protection Act, which is the seminal act that's been used to protect children and families in New Mexico from all kinds of abuse and violence. I also wrote, for instance, what's called the Drug Precursor Act, which is the law that law enforcement uses currently to bust the meth labs that are causing problems in our communities. I also served as a domestic violence hearing officer. After I got out of the legislature, the judges in our district said this was the first time that they ever had a legislator who passed a law, put it out into the districts, and then went into the district and tried to make that law work and happen for the community in the protection of victims of domestic violence. So that's primarily the experience that I have with relation to that.
Except for serving my country in the military, my career has been dedicated to law enforcement. I started out as an assistant district attorney in Las Vegas, New Mexico, prosecuting DUIs and felonies. And not that mass important to being Attorney General, but I actually had 3 times the felony prosecutions in Las Vegas alone that Gary's commercials say I have. But, and I prosecuted criminals in 9 courts. From there, I went to the FBI, and I was on the Violent Crimes Task Force. There, I went after sexual predators, I went after bank robbers, and other violent criminals. I was in private practice for a couple years, and I served as a guardian ad litem for abusing and neglected children. And that's where I really developed my disgust for the sexual predators, how the onslaught of the internet sexual predators, and knew that I needed to be in a position to do something more about it. And that's when I applied to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office and prosecute there. I prosecuted white-collar crime, including public corruption at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I also prosecuted violent crime at the U.S. Attorney's Office, murderers and some of the sick predators. That's the experience that I bring to the Attorney General's race. I know, having worked at the Attorney General's, the District Attorney's Office and working at the U.S. Attorney's Office, guess what? There's a gap in between there that is not being met by either office. And if the Attorney General does not fill that gap and stand up on behalf of that victim, then that victim will not receive justice.
Lawyer, what will be your principal criteria for bringing legal action?
If they violated the law? We have to restore integrity to our system of government. Serving in Afghanistan, I saw the remains of the Taliban. I saw the way they treat their women, their children, their lack of an open and accountable government. And I saw good men give their lives so that we could have all that here in the United States. And that's why I come with such a passion, along with the 5 children that I'm going to leave the state to. So we, as the people's lawyer, we have to have an Attorney General who will stand up, first of all, and make sure that we maintain a government of integrity. That's why I'm going to go out with the slightest infraction of the public trust, so word gets out that that's not acceptable in New Mexico anymore. We sadly shouldn't have to be dealing with public corruption, but we do, and so I will. And as I deal with public corruption, then I'll move on to those important issues that inflict and affect all of us. We're talking about the internet crimes, those sexual predators that prey on our youngest children, and those that internet crimes where they try to scam our seniors out of their life savings. I will be very aggressive in that area. I will be very aggressive when it comes to drug trafficking. You know down here, as well as anyone else, that the majority of them, 98%, is coming across from Mexico, whether directly into the state or up into Arizona and over. I'm the one with the federal law enforcement experience to work with the border agents, to work with the National Guard, to make sure that we stop it at the border before it comes into our communities and our homes. Thank you.
Well, the Constitution of the state of New Mexico says that the Attorney General will represent the state in cases where the state is sued or in cases where the governor requests them to do that. Also, they represent the Secretary of State's office with regard to problems with the election code. So that there have been some misconception, I think, through this campaign that the Attorney General is some sort of super prosecutor. And by and large, the district attorney's offices are the prosecutors and prosecute most of the crimes in New Mexico. The Attorney General's office will prosecute crimes if they are recommended to them by the district attorneys, because the district attorney's office doesn't have either the resources or has some sort of conflict or something rather like that. But otherwise, most of the prosecution takes place at the district attorney's level. Where the Attorney General is going to bring lawsuits primarily has to do with, for instance, water cases. If we have a problem with the state of Texas and they're trying to take the water from the state of New Mexico, then the Attorney General's office is going to represent the state of New Mexico in that lawsuit. We do have a capital crimes division, we have a violent crimes division. I think that as the Attorney General will take opportunities that I have indeed to go after scam artists and to go after certain crimes that are committed, particularly corruption crimes. I do think that the Attorney General's office, and if we don't have the legal framework to do it now, we need to make sure that we do, because I want to be working with James Lewis and with some other folks to clean up the corruption that has been a problem in New Mexico during the time period that we've been out of office. We feel like it's most important that Democrats deal with issues that might be causing problems for the Democratic Party. Those a bit, but my number one priority is indeed going to be what we call the protection of New Mexico families. That has to do with what I've been doing for 20 years in public service, fighting to prevent domestic violence, fighting to keep drug drivers off the roads, fighting to keep drugs out of our communities. That's going to be my number one priority. Number two is indeed going to be going after the problems of corruption that have cropped up in New Mexico, to deal with those problems, to make sure that people in New Mexico feel like they can trust their government, that they can trust their elected officials to be spending their money wisely and investing their money wisely. And I think the way that we're going to do that is by creating a public corruption unit within the Attorney General's office that will specialize in those kinds of cases. We'll have lawyers who specialize in that. We'll have forensic auditors who can go out and look at the audit trail for those agencies differently than the state auditor does. It's too bad we don't have the auditors here, but we want to make sure that we're not just looking to see if the numbers line up on the bottom of the page. We want to find any and all of those cases where there are public funds that are being misspent or might be misspent, and nip that in the bud so that we don't ever get into a situation like the one that we had before. First priority for me going into the legislature is legislation to protect our children and our families, and also to make sure that we have all the resources that we need to deal with the public corruption issue in Mexico.
You know, it's easy for someone to get up and talk about corruption, but there's only one candidate here, and that's me, who has prosecuted public corruption and has fought in the war overseas to ensure the integrity and security of our future and our government. But I've also served as a criminal investigator, as an FBI agent, so I know what it takes to go out, build that case, and bring it to the prosecutor. I'm concerned because my opponent can't even find an investigator to go to a courthouse and count the right number of cases I prosecute. So I bring the skill to deal with corruption. I will root it out vigorously. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, what you are. If you break the law, you're going to be prosecuted. I'm all about political discourse. I think that's good. What we're doing here tonight is good. But you have to do it through the rule of law. That's what we have to pass on to our kids. The other thing is these sexual predators. We were the last to pass a Megan's law, the last to ban child pornography in New Mexico. That's unacceptable. I'm going to fight for a Jessica's law. We're working on being one of the last in the country that doesn't have a Jessica's law. We're one of 19 states. A Jessica's law will give mandatory 25-year sentence, followed by a lifetime of GPS monitoring for those sexual abusers of our children, the most innocent children, age 11 and under. As a father, I will fight for that. As a prosecutor, I will fight for that.